The corridors of Whitehall Palace reeked of sickness and smoke, the sweet perfume of burning cedar failing to mask the rot that seeped through the king's bedchamber door. Even the torchlight along the walls burned low and sullen, as though unwilling to illuminate what lay within. Henry Tudor, King of England, once the proud lion of the realm, now lay swollen and mottled upon his velvet-draped bed, his vast frame shaking beneath fevered sweats. His legs, ulcerated and reeking, oozed corruption through linen wrappings, and the royal surgeons murmured prayers under their breath as they worked, knowing no medicine on earth could turn back this tide. The courtiers dared not look him in the eye. Those who did saw only rage swimming in the yellowing whites, rage at the pain, rage at the creeping shadow of death, rage that even kings could not command life to linger. Outside, the winter night pressed close to the windows. Ice formed on the panes, throwing back distorted shapes of figures who waited in silence. The Duke of Norfolk paced the gallery with nervous tread, his breath fogging the air. Beside him, Bishop Gardner whispered to a trusted page, his words too low to catch but his meaning clear enough. The king's end would summon wolves to court. The Protestant faction, led by Edward Seymour and his ambitious kin, already plotted in shadowed chambers, while Catholic loyalists sharpened knives of their own. Inside the bedchamber, Sir Anthony Denny, the groom of the stool and perhaps the only man who dared speak truth, leaned near the king's ear. "Your Majesty, you must prepare your soul. No man, however mighty, escapes the hand of God." Henry's lips, cracked and purple, twisted in a grimace. "God will wait until I give him leave," he rasped. His voice was still iron, though rust crept through. "Send Cranmer. I'll not die shriven by a papist." Yet even as he spoke, his breathing hitched, a deep rattle shaking through his chest. The Queen's name, Catherine Parr, slipped between his teeth unbidden, a curse and a plea in one. He had accused her of heresy not a month past, and only cunning had saved her from the scaffold. Now she lingered outside the chamber, pale and watchful, knowing the king's last breath could seal her own fate. The air grew thicker with candle smoke. Henry's fingers twitched toward the sword propped against his bedside. An old habit, clinging to power through cold steel. But his grip failed. His strength drained like wine spilled into earth. A long groan left his lips, half prayer, half defiance. Then a sudden crash shattered the stillness. The canopy above the royal bed split under its own weight, timbers snapping like bones. Courtiers rushed forward, fearing the king crushed, but it was worse. Henry Tudor sat upright, wild-eyed, lips flecked with blood. "Traitors!" he bellowed, voice breaking into a cough. "I smell them! I smell them in these walls!" His gaze fixed not on Norfolk, not on Gardner, but on someone or something, unseen in the dark corner of the room. He pointed, trembling violently, as if he saw an intruder no one else could. "Get out of my chamber!" he roared. "You will not take me yet!" But when the men turned, swords drawn, there was nothing there, only shadows crawling over the tapestries. Henry collapsed back into the bed, his chest heaving, the sheets soaked crimson where his ulcers had burst. "Lock the doors," he croaked, his voice faint now, almost childlike. "Do not let her in. Do not let her in." No one dared ask who she was. In the flickering half-light, Catherine Parr's silhouette moved behind the door, listening. And, deeper still, within the chamber walls, something stirred, a sound too soft to be boots, too steady to be rats. The king's eyes rolled back, the torches guttered. And somewhere down the long corridor a scream rose, distant, sharp, and quickly cut short. The courtiers froze where they stood. "Who was that?" whispered Denny, pale as ash. No answer came, save for the echo of Henry VIII's ragged breath. Then, the door bolts slid on their own, metal grinding against metal. The next dawn never seemed to come. A sickly red glow seeped into the royal apartments. though no sun broke the clouds over London. The court whispered of omens, a blood moon unseen, phantom bells tolling at St. Paul's, though no rope had been pulled. The king had slept little, calling out names long dead. Anne Boleyn, Thomas More, Wolsey. He cursed them, prayed for them, then cursed again, as if his soul were torn between pleading and rage. Meanwhile, in the great hall, the factions gathered like carrion birds. Edward Seymour, sharp-eyed and cold, murmured to his allies over untouched trenchers of meat. Norfolk and Gardiner glowered from the far table, knowing their power would vanish should Seymour control the boy Prince Edward once the king died. Above them all, the tapestries seemed to watch, their woven saints and demons leaning closer to hear the treason whispered below. "His Majesty cannot last the week," Seymour said softly, fingers drumming the table. "When he goes, we move. Quickly, the papists must fall, root and branch." "And the Queen?" a younger lord asked. Seymour's lips curved in something not quite a smile. "If she is wise, she will keep silent. If not, well, the tower stands ready." That night, a strange banquet was ordered in the Privy Chamber, not by Henry himself, but by some unseen authority in his name. Platters of venison and swan, gilded with saffron and honey, appeared though the king could barely swallow broth. No one dared refuse to sit, though a chill crept through every noble present. Henry lay propped in his chair, his eyes sunk deep, his face waxen. He stared at the food with loathing, yet spoke to the empty air at his side, as though to a companion only he could see. "They are all thieves," he muttered. "Every one of them. You were right." "Your Grace?" Denny whispered, uncertain to whom the king spoke. But Henry's gaze did not turn. His lips curled into a ghastly grin, and he lifted a trembling goblet as if to toast some unseen guest. "Soon they shall all feast, on ashes." The torches flared high, casting monstrous shadows on the walls, and as the courtiers watched, in terror, the meat upon the platters blackened and smoked, as though scorched by invisible fire. A single roasted swan shuddered, its neck jerking upright with a hiss, before collapsing again in a ruin of feathers and char. Women shrieked, men crossed themselves, but Henry only laughed, a deep, broken laugh that ended in a cough spraying blood across the white damask cloth. "Bring Cranmer," he roared again, though his voice cracked, "before it's too late." At that moment, the doors of the chamber slammed shut of their own accord. Locks clicked. The windows rattled, though no wind stirred outside, and from behind the king's chair, in the darkness beyond the torchlight, came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, drawing nearer. The courtiers clutched their swords, yet none dared approach. Henry turned his head, and his face went white with something beyond fear. "No," he whispered. "Not you." The torches guttered out, plunging the hall into darkness. A single scream rang out, Norfolk's voice, hoarse and panicked, and then silence. The chamber doors burst open at last, letting in servants with lanterns. The air was thick with smoke, sweet and foul, as if the feast itself had rotted in moments. Norfolk was gone, his chair overturned, his sword abandoned on the floor, though no one had seen him leave. A trail of dark droplets led away from the table, glistening red in the lamplight, but vanished as suddenly as it began, as though swallowed by the very stones. Henry sat rigid in his chair, lips purple, eyes wide and fixed on something no one else could see. His trembling hand clutched the armrest, nails digging into the wood. "I told you not to let her in," he rasped. "Did you hear me, Denny? Did you?" "Yes, sire," Denny stammered, though he understood nothing. The Queen had been locked away in her rooms since sunset. Whoever, or whatever, Henry feared it was not Catherine Parr. The king's voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw Anne tonight. She stood there, just there." by the hearth, her head whole again, her eyes, they were not kind. His jaw clenched. She wants me in hell with her. The room went deathly silent. Courtiers exchanged frightened glances, unsure whether this was madness or something darker. Send for Cranmer. Henry bellowed suddenly, slamming a fist on the table with startling strength. He shall take my confession before I die. As messengers fled to obey, the king's gaze roved across the frightened assembly. None of you leave this room. Not one. His breath rattled like old parchment tearing. Too many whispers in these halls. Too many eager for my crown. I will know who betrays me. Then, to the horror of all present, Henry began to confess aloud, not to a priest, but to the room itself. He spoke of Anne Boleyn's false charges, of Cromwell's cunning hand in her death, of friends sent to the block for imagined treason, of wealth seized from abbeys while peasants starved. He named names, Norfolk, Gardiner, Seymour, accusing, each of treachery and ambition. The courtiers stood frozen, for every word was both admission and death sentence. His voice rose to a roar. I am the King of England, and I have damned my soul to keep the crown. Do you hear me? I have damned it. Suddenly, a crash of glass shattered the moment. One of the high windows blown inward, though the night outside was still. A black shape, quick as a shadow, passed across the floor and vanished into the darkness beyond the hearth. The torches sputtered and died again. When light was restored, Henry slumped unconscious in his chair, and Norfolk's name was on his lips. Yet no trace of the Duke could be found anywhere in Whitehall. By morning, rumors swirled like crows above the palace rooftops. Norfolk had fled, some said. Others swore he had been taken by force. Gardiner muttered of devils at court, while Seymour whispered that papists plotted to seize power. The king's rage had not cooled. He demanded Norfolk's arrest and ordered the Tower prepared. Cranmer arrived at last, pale and breathless, to hear the royal confession. But Henry would not speak plainly to him. It is too late for words, the king croaked, his lips trembling. The crown is hollow. My soul leaks through its cracks. He gripped Cranmer's sleeve with surprising strength. Tell Edward. Tell him to trust no one, not even you. All day the palace shook with Henry's ravings. He accused Catherine, Parr of secret dealings, Gardiner of poisoning his wine, Seymour of plotting regicide. He ordered new locks on his chamber doors and kept his sword beside him even while sleeping. Servants swore they heard footsteps pacing his room when he lay still as death, and voices whispering near his bed when no one stood near. That night, as icy rain lashed London, a pale figure appeared in the gallery. Norfolk himself, or something, wearing his face. Guards swore he walked past them without a sound, though his boots were caked with mud. When they followed, they found only a smear of blood on the wall and a single glove lying in the torchlight. Henry heard of it and roared in terror and fury. "He is dead!" the king cried. "Dead, and yet he comes to mock me!" he ordered. The palace chapel sealed and mass sung at midnight to drive out whatever spirit haunted him. But when the priest began the Latin prayers, the candles snuffed out as if by unseen breath. A deep groan echoed through the rafters, and from the darkness above, drops of warm blood pattered down onto the altar cloth. Henry collapsed, clutching his chest, his eyes rolling back. The courtiers screamed as they carried him to his bed. Catherine Parr tried to reach him, but soldiers barred her way. "The king forbids you," they told her grimly. Inside the royal chamber, Henry stirred only once before dawn. "She waits for me," he muttered to Denny, barely audible. "Anne waits. And Wolsey, too. They are all waiting," his face twisted in pain and terror. "Hell is full of my friends." At that moment, a knock came at the door. Not the soft tap of a servant, but 3 heavy blows, shaking the oaken planks in their frame. The next day, Henry insisted on being carried to the great hall, declaring he would dine among his nobles as he once did in the days of glory. The surgeons begged him to stay abed, but his will was iron even as his body decayed. They dressed him in crimson velvet to hide the stains of his sores and placed a broad sword across his lap. The nobles gathered, silent and grim, watching the dying monarch preside over what felt more like a funeral than a feast. No music played. No toasts were offered. Then Henry gave an order none expected. "Bring me my hounds," he said. "Tonight I hunt. If death wants me, let him chase me through the forest like a stag." Despite protests, they obeyed. By moonlight, the king was borne into Windsor Park, wrapped in furs, his hunting spear clutched weakly in one hand. The hounds bayed as shadows moved among the trees, and courtiers shivered to see mist twisting in strange shapes around them. Henry shouted into the darkness, "Come then, take me if you dare." Something answered, not an echo, but a voice, soft and cold. "We are already here." The hounds yelped and bolted, their howls fading into the black woods. Horses reared, throwing riders, and torches died one by one. In the confusion, Henry's litter was overturned, casting the king into the mud. When they found him, his velvet was torn, his crown lost, his face spattered with blood not his own. He whispered only one thing as they carried him back to the palace. "I saw her." She smiled. The next morning, the royal surgeons discovered deep claw marks on the litter poles, though no animal in England bore such talons, and Catherine Parr wept in her chambers, knowing the end was near, and fearing what would come after.